Now, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan also stated that President Trump would be the last U.S. president. So for those black people pouring their hope into another Caucasian demon by the name of Joseph Biden, who is owned by the synagogue of Satan, let us see if those hopes are dashed aside when President Trump remains as U.S. president, either through the vote or through some scheme that suspends the U.S. Constitution and ushers in martial law throughout the United States. Now, on this note, the warmonger and bulldog Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has been effectively beaten back in his efforts to portray China as a tyrannical state that is impeding the freedoms of those who allegedly won independence. He is working to justify military actions against China. His impertinent case has been undermined by the vicious talk and actions of the Trump administration, basically President Trump, and the handling of the protesters in the George Floyd murder. So this pit bull, Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State, is also making bogus statements to justify moving towards a military confrontation with Iran. So let us consider this wicked effort under the auspices of yet another bogus claim coming from these demons in President Trump's cabinet, or should I say kennel. It states, despite President Trump's previous claims that Islamic State has been 100% eliminated, the U.S. is seeking international funding to continued anti-ISIS military operations. The true target of this effort, however, is Iran. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has called on the international community to overcome the economic constraints imposed on the global economy and provide more than $700 million in order to confront the threat posed by Islamic State, ISIS, or formerly ISIS, in Iraq and Syria. Now, does the U.S. government really have any real allies, or is it bullying other nations to support its warmongering campaign? Despite the events taking place within the United States, we cannot forget that we have hateful and belligerent warmongers controlling the United States government. And I would not call the racial unrest or what's happening between police and the citizenry as a distraction. It's certainly not a distraction. But as one person used to say always or often, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. So we can never take our eyes off the fact that we have traditionally, to this day, have warmongers who are beating the war drum, even while we raise our heads to seek and pursue justice and fair dealing in a government, state, local, and federal, that says it's for the people and by the people. So the Trump administration is unveiling the vast deviation from the U.S. Constitution that U.S. presidents have enjoyed in their sickness to lord over humanity. And that too is being beaten back, even by those he thought would have allegiance to him. Now, when I was growing up, many of our parents used to say when we were defiant and obeying their instructions, a hard head makes a soft behind. This cliche goes for the United States government, and it also goes for the American people, who, although seems to be progressive, have always proven in the long run to be gullible at first instant. And of course, the events surrounding the COVID-19 crisis shows that that trend is still in full effect. Well, the Trump administration seems to be blind to the reality and presence of the great mother plane and how the supreme being, Master Fard Muhammad, will use it against any U.S. military war effort. Somebody needs to whisper in his ear that fact, because it seems to be one that's heavily disregarded by the warmongers in his cabinet kennel. Well, to this day, most Americans find it hard to believe that something sinister was behind the 9/11 atrocity in New York City that propelled the U.S. into war against Afghanistan and Iraq. And they're in both states or both countries at this very moment. However, today it is becoming easier for us to accept the truth that government leaders are wickedly blind to the core and care nothing about those whom they claim to govern. Now, why am I saying this? Well, eventually, the Trump administration will need a solid reason to launch the global war of desolation against Russia, China, and Iran, or maybe those who control the Trump administration. Now, these demons of the synagogue of Satan don't think nothing about a U.S. president. They're really the quintessential pawn in the whole equation, but they'll bring in those who they know have a certain mentality. And because he has a doggish mentality, of course, they believe he can easily be duped, as other presidents before him were. Now, if we watch the interaction of the Trump administration with these three nations, again, Iran, China, and Russia, it is easy to see that the U.S. is beating the war drum. However, the simple strategies that once worked to influence the U.S. citizenry to support the vicious lies of their presidents and Congress have been foiled. President Trump is in the doghouse, along with other pit bull members of his kennel. The only move that those who control the Trump administration has is to orchestrate another false flag operation on U.S. soil, maybe something similar to 9/11, and then blame that atrocity on Russia, China, and Iran, as they blamed it on Osama bin Laden, and justify the bombing and war campaign in Afghanistan. But that wasn't even the big target. The big target was Iraq or Iraq. Well, what is a false flag operation? Consider this. A false flag is a covert operation designed to deceive. The deception creates the appearance of a particular party, group, or nation being responsible for some activity, disguising the actual source of responsibility. The term false flag originally referred to pirate ships that flew flags of countries as a disguise to prevent their victims from fleeing or preparing for battle. Sometimes the flag would remain, and the blame for the attack would be laid incorrectly on another country. The term today extends beyond naval encounters to include countries that organize attacks on themselves and make the attacks appear to be by enemy nations or terrorists, thus giving the nation that was supposedly attacked a pretext for domestic repression and foreign military aggression. Operations carried out during peacetime by civilian organizations as well as covert government agencies can, by extension, also be called false flag operations if they seek to hide the real organization behind an operation. So we need to have our antennas up, because there's a lot of talk now circulating in the news media and really from the Trump administration about terrorist groups. So one way or the other, They are hell bent on that war of desolation.